The screech of tires pierced the Seoul night at exactly 2:47 a.m. A convoy of 5 black Mercedes-Benz vehicles came to an abrupt halt on the empty highway, their headlights illuminating a sight that made hardened criminals freeze in shock. A 7-year-old girl stood in the middle of the road, arms spread wide like she was crucified against the darkness, her school bag hanging off one shoulder, facing down vehicles that could crush her in an instant. The lead car's door opened. Kong Min, who stepped out, his designer suit immaculate despite the late hour, his face a mask of controlled fury. Behind him, 12 men in identical black tactical gear emerged from the convoy, hands instinctively moving toward concealed weapons. They fanned out in military precision, scanning for threats, for ambush, for whatever trap had just been sprung on the most dangerous man in Seoul. But there was no trap, just a child. A Nigerian child with cornrows in her hair and tears streaming down her dark cheeks, standing in the road like she'd been waiting for this exact moment her entire life. Min, who approached slowly, his voice cutting through the night like a blade. "Why are you standing in my road, child? Do you have a death wish? Do you understand that my driver could have ended your life before he even saw you?" The little girl's voice came out steady despite her trembling. "I didn't want to die, sir. I wanted you to help me. My mommy said if anything really, really bad happened, I should stop the car with many other cars following it. She showed me your car many times when we drove past your neighborhood. She said the man in that car was powerful enough to fight monsters." Min, whose eyes narrowed. "I don't help children. I'm not a charity. Go home to your parents." "I can't." The girl's voice cracked. "My daddy wants to take me away. And he hit my mommy on the head, and there was red stuff everywhere, and she's not breathing, and she gave me this bag and told me to run and find you and stop your car no matter what, because you're the only one who can save us, and please, please, please don't let my daddy take me away." The words tumbled out in a desperate rush. Min, who raised his hand, silencing her. He crouched down, his face level with hers. "What's in the bag?" "Evidence." The girl's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mommy said always collect evidence when grown-ups do bad things. She's been collecting it for 3 years. Min, who gestured to one of his men, who took the school bag and brought it to him. What he found inside made his blood run cold. Not because of the violence documented there, he'd seen worse 1,000 times, but because of the meticulous, desperate organization of it all. First, there were photographs. Dozens of them, printed on regular paper, carefully dated in a woman's handwriting. The first showed a beautiful Nigerian woman with a black eye, her smile forced for the camera, a date scrawled in the corner, March 2021. The second showed bruises on her arms shaped like handprints. The third showed her lips split open, dried blood on her chin. By the 10th photograph, Min, whose jaw was clenched so tight his teeth ached. But it was the documents that changed everything. Bank statements showing wire transfers from Korean accounts to Nigerian phone numbers. Receipts for Western Union payments sent to multiple names in Lagos. Printed emails discussing investment opportunities that were clearly fraudulent. Phone records showing calls to hundreds of Korean numbers. Screenshots of text messages promising returns of 300% on cryptocurrency investments. This wasn't just domestic violence documentation. This was a comprehensive dossier on a romance scam operation. Min, who pulled out a small notebook, handwritten in neat Korean. His men gathered around as he read aloud. Target profiles. Lonely Korean men aged 45 to 65. Widowers preferred. Approach through international dating apps. Build relationship for 3 to 6 months. Create financial emergency. Family medical bills work best. Request money transfer. Disappear or create new emergency. Average take per target, 50 to 200 million won. One of his men, a scar-faced enforcer named Park, leaned in. "Boss, there are at least 40 documented victims in here. Some of them sent money 5, 6 times. This operation has been running for years." But it was the final item that made Min Hu's decision. A printed photograph, slightly blurry like it had been taken from a distance and enhanced. A Nigerian man in his 30s, handsome, charismatic looking, laughing at an outdoor restaurant in Itaewon. And there on his forearm, visible below his rolled-up sleeve, was a tattoo. A coiled viper with its fangs bared. The Viper Network. Men whose voice was deadly quiet. The men around him tensed. They all knew that name. Every crime organization in Seoul knew that name. The Viper Network was a West African romance scam syndicate that had been bleeding Korea dry for 5 years. They were ghosts, never staying in one place long enough to catch, always using local Korean girlfriends as fronts, always disappearing before law enforcement could move. And they just cost men whose organization 400 million won 6 months ago when one of his junior members, a man named Kim who handled their legitimate property investments, fell for their scheme. Kim had been so devastated by the betrayal and the loss that he'd taken his own life. The Council of Seven, the ruling body of Seoul's organized crime families, had been hunting the Viper Network ever since. They'd even sent one of their members back to Nigeria to track them down, with no success. The council had made a promise. Whoever brought down the Viper Network would become the head of the council. The supreme boss. The man who controlled all of Seoul's underground. Men who looked at the little girl. "Is this your father?" He showed her the photograph. "Yes, sir. That's my daddy. His name is Chitty, but he's not really my daddy. Mommy said he pretends to love us, but he only loves money and hurting people. Why didn't your mother like your daddy? She did like him at first." The girl's voice was so small. "Back in Nigeria, before I was born, they were happy. But then daddy started doing bad things. Stealing money from people on the computer. Making ladies cry. Mommy said she didn't know until I was 3 years old, and she found his secret phones and saw all the bad things. She tried to leave him, but he said he'd kill her if she took me away. So she ran. We came all the way to Korea to hide. We changed our names and everything. We were safe for 2 whole years. And then, he found us 3 days ago." The girl started crying, her small body shaking. "He came to our apartment with his friends, the ones with guns and mean faces. He said we were going back to Nigeria, and Mommy would help him with his business or he'd make her sorry. Mommy said no. She said she'd tell the police everything. That's when he hit her, right on her head with a bottle. There was so much red stuff. And she fell down and stopped moving, and he told me to say goodbye because we were leaving tonight, and I should forget I ever had a mother who was a traitor. How did you get away?" Mommy opened her eyes for just 1 second when Daddy went to the bathroom. She whispered to me to take the bag from under her bed and run. She said to find your car and stop it no matter what. She said you were our only hope because the police wouldn't believe us, and they couldn't protect us from Daddy's friends. She said I should show you the evidence and beg you to save her. If you're watching this series for the first time, that was the missing first 7 minutes of part 1. If you haven't seen it yet, this is your cue to check the description of this video for the link to the first part of this video. Only then can you join us in the second part. Trust me, you'll love what Min Who does next. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the beautiful stories that are coming in. Meanwhile, the little girl, Splendor, has finally succeeded in bringing Min Who to meet her recovering mother. Let's see what happens next in this second part. The silence in that hospital room stretched for exactly 8 seconds. 8 seconds where Kong Min Who, the man who negotiated billion-won deals without blinking, couldn't find a single word to say to the woman whose life he'd saved. Maria broke the silence first. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." She stepped closer, and Min Who noticed she moved with a slight limp, a reminder of the violence she'd survived. "Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for protecting my daughter. Thank you for giving us a future when we had none. I told you, there's no debt." Min Who's voice came out rougher than he intended. "I know what you told me." Maria smiled, and something in Min Who's chest tightened. "But I also know what I saw. A man who took a bullet for a stranger. A man who calls every day to check on someone he claims not to care about. A man who sends gifts and arranges apartments and answers midnight phone calls from 7-year-old who can't sleep. Your daughter is persistent. She gets it from me." Maria tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle she intended to solve. "My daughter also says you're lonely, that you live in a big house all by yourself with men who are afraid of you. She says when you tell her stories at night, your voice sounds sad. Your daughter talks too much. My daughter sees things adults try to hide." Maria moved closer still, close enough that Min Who could smell her shampoo, something floral and completely unlike the antiseptic hospital smell he'd grown used to. She says you're a good man pretending to be bad. And I think she's right. Before Minhu could respond, before he could put up the walls he'd spent 42 years building, Splendor grabbed both their hands. Can Mr. Kong have dinner with us tomorrow? At our new apartment? Please, Mommy? He helped us move, and he's never seen where we live, and I want to cook for him like you taught me. Splendor, Mr. Kong is very busy. Maria started, but Minhu interrupted. What are you cooking? Splendor's face lit up like he'd just promised her the world. Jollof rice. Mommy's teaching me the family recipe. It's the best food in the whole world, and you've probably never had it, because Korean people don't know about Nigerian food, but once you taste it, you'll want it forever and ever. The metaphor wasn't lost on Minhu. Once you taste it, you'll want it forever. He looked at Maria, who was watching him with those knowing eyes, and realized he was already in too deep. Already wanted things he had no business wanting. Already imagined futures that had no place in his world of violence and blood. 6 o'clock, he heard himself say, I'll be there at 6. Splendor actually jumped up and down. This is the best day ever. I'm going to make the tables so pretty and wear my favorite dress and show you my new room and everything. That night, Minhu sat in his study, nursing expensive whiskey and questioning every decision he'd made in the past 3 weeks. His second-in-command, Shin, knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege only he had after 20 years of service. You're making a mistake, boss. Shin's voice was blunt. Getting involved with civilians. Getting attached. It's going to get them killed or get you killed or both. I'm having dinner with them. That's all. Is it? Shin sat down uninvited. Because from where I'm standing, you've been different since you saved that woman. Softer. Distracted. The council's noticed. Your enemies have noticed. And sooner or later, someone's going to use that woman and her daughter against you. Let them try. Minhu's voice went cold. I've destroyed men for less. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're already protective of them. Already willing to go to war for them. That makes you vulnerable. And vulnerable men in our world don't survive long. Maybe I'm tired of just surviving. Shin stood up, his face grave. Then I'll double the security at their apartment building. Because if you're going to care about them, I'm going to make sure they live long enough for it to matter. After Shin left, Minhu pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. 53 messages from Splendor over the past week. Stories about her day. Questions about Korea. Pictures of things she found interesting. A child's way of saying, I trust you. I want you in my life. Please don't disappear. And he hadn't. For the first time in his adult life, Kong Minhu hadn't disappeared when someone tried to get close. The next evening, Minhu stood outside apartment 804 in a building in Gangnam, one of Seoul's safest and most expensive districts. He'd arranged for Maria and Splendor to live here specifically because it had 24-hour security, cameras on every floor, and most of the residents were wealthy enough to mind their own business. He was wearing casual clothes, dark jeans, and a simple black shirt, because Splendor had told him on the phone that fancy suits were too scary for dinner. His men were stationed throughout the building, invisible but present. Juan was in the lobby pretending to read newspaper. Park was on the roof with a sniper rifle, because Minhu never went anywhere without backup. He knocked. The door flew open immediately. Splendor stood there in a bright yellow dress, her cornrows decorated with colorful beads, her smile wide enough to split her face. You came. You actually came. She grabbed his hand and pulled him inside. Mommy said maybe you'd change your mind because important people always cancel at the last minute, but I knew you wouldn't, because you keep your promises. The apartment was modest by Minhu's standards, but clearly expensive by normal ones. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, large windows overlooking the city, and it smelled incredible. Spices and tomatoes and something else he couldn't identify. Rich and complex and completely foreign. Maria emerged from the kitchen wearing a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her face still showing faint bruises but her eyes bright and alive. Welcome to our home, Mr. Kong. It's not much, but it's ours. Thanks to you. It's perfect. Minhu meant it. The apartment felt lived in already, warm in a way his mansion had never been. There were Splendor's drawings on the refrigerator, books stacked on a coffee table, a small plant on the windowsill, signs of life, of hope, of people building a future. Dinner is almost ready. Maria wiped her hands on her apron. Splendor, why don't you show Mr. Khan your room while I finish up? Come on. Splendor dragged him down the hallway to a bedroom that was exactly what a 7-year-old's room should be. Pink walls, stuffed animals, a small desk with coloring books, and on the wall, a drawing that made Minhu stop in his tracks. It was a crayon drawing of 3 people holding hands. A woman, a small girl, and a tall man with dark hair. Above them, Splendor had written in careful letters, "My family." That's you, Mommy, and me. Splendor pointed to each figure. I drew it yesterday. Mommy said family isn't just people who share blood. It's people who protect each other and care about each other. So that makes you family, right? Minhu crouched down to her level, his throat tight. Splendor, I'm not your family. I'm someone who helped you when you needed it. But you're still helping us. Splendor's voice was matter of fact. You call every day. You sent us to this apartment. You answer when I call you at night. You came to dinner even though you're really busy. That sounds like family to me. What about your father? Your real father? Splendor's expression darkened. Chitty isn't my father. Fathers protect their children. They don't hurt their mothers. They don't steal from people. Mommy says he was never really my father, just a man who helped make me. She says real fathers are the ones who stay and care and keep their children safe. She says real fathers are chosen, not born. And you think I could be that? I don't think. I know. Splendor grabbed his hand. You already saved me once. You already keep the monsters away. You already make Mommy smile when she thinks I'm not looking. That's what fathers do, right? Men who didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain to a 7-year-old that men like him didn't get to be fathers, didn't get to have families, didn't get to pretend they were anything other than the monsters they'd become. But before he could try, Maria called from the kitchen. Dinner's ready. The table was set beautifully. Candles, real napkins, 3 plates of jollof rice with fried plantains and chicken. It looked nothing like Korean food and smelled absolutely incredible. This is amazing, Minhu said as he tasted the first bite. The rice was perfectly spiced, the chicken tender, the plantains sweet and crispy. I've never had anything like this. That's because Korean men don't know what they're missing. Maria smiled, pleased. In Nigeria, jollof rice is what we make for celebrations, for weddings and birthdays, and when someone comes home after a long time away. It's a dish that says you're important to us. I'm honored. Minhu meant it. They ate slowly, Splendor chattering about school plans, about the Korean language classes Maria had enrolled her in, about the children she'd met in the building. Normal conversation. Domestic. Peaceful. Everything Minhu's life had never been. And then Splendor asked the question that changed everything. Mr. Kong, do you have a family? The table went quiet. Maria looked at her daughter with gentle warning, but Splendor just blinked innocently, waiting for an answer. No. Minhu set down his fork. I don't. Why not? Because men like me don't get families. We get organizations and territories and enemies. But not families. But you could have one. Splendor's voice was small but certain. You could have us. Mommy needs someone to protect her, and I need someone to tell me stories, and you need someone to make you smile. We could all be a family together. Splendor. Maria's voice was gentle but firm. That's not how it works. Mr. Kong has his own life. We can't just decide he's part of our family because we want him to be. Why not? Splendor looked between them. He saved us. He takes care of us. He comes to dinner. He answers when I call. Isn't that what families do? It's more complicated than that, sweetheart. But Splendor wasn't done. She looked directly at Minhu, her eyes too old for a 7-year-old. Can you be my new daddy? My real daddy? Not like Chitty who hurt us, but like a real father who keeps us safe and makes us happy? The question hung in the air like a grenade with a pin pulled. Minhu looked at Maria, who had gone pale, clearly mortified. Looked at Splendor, who was watching him with hope and trust and absolute certainty that he would say yes. Looked at the drawing on the refrigerator, the one that showed 3 people holding hands, and realized he was at a crossroads. He could walk away right now, could tell them thank you for dinner, put distance between himself and these 2 civilians who'd somehow cracked open his carefully constructed armor. could go back to his world of violence and control and loneliness. Or he could do something crazy, something dangerous, something that would make him vulnerable in ways he'd spent 42 years avoiding. He could stay. Splendor. Minhu's voice was gentle. Being a father is a big responsibility. It means being there when things are hard. It means protecting someone with your life. It means putting someone else's happiness before your own. I know. Splendor nodded seriously. That's what Mommy does for me every day. And that's what you did when you took a bullet for her. So you already know how to be a father. You just need to decide if you want to be mine. I'm a good man. You're good enough for me. I've done terrible things. Mommy says everyone does bad things sometimes. What matters is if you do good things too. And you do. You saved us. That's the goodest thing anyone's ever done for me. Minhu looked at Maria again. She was watching him with tears in her eyes, not saying anything, letting him make this choice on his own. And in that moment, he saw his future split into two paths. One path led back to his mansion, to his empire, to the loneliness he'd accepted as the price of power. The other led into unknown territory, led to family dinners and bedtime stories and a 7-year-old who wanted to call him daddy, led to caring about people more than he cared about himself, led to vulnerability and risk and the kind of fear he'd never experienced in any firefight. The second path terrified him more than any enemy ever had, which is exactly why he chose it. I can't be your father, Minhu said slowly, and watched Splendor's face fall. But maybe I could try. Maybe I could learn how to be someone worthy of being called that. If your mother agrees. If you understand that I'm going to make mistakes because I've never done this before. Splendor launched herself out of her chair and into his arms before he finished speaking. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I'll teach you how to be a daddy. It's easy. You just have to love me and Mommy and keep the monsters away and play with me sometimes and tell me I'm smart and brave. That'd sound easy. Minhu held her, this small human who trusted him completely, and felt something fundamental shift in his chest. The ice that had lived there for 42 years cracking, melting, making room for something warm and terrifying and completely foreign. He looked at Maria over Splendor's head. She was crying openly now, her hands covering her mouth. He couldn't read her expression. Couldn't tell if she was happy or horrified or somewhere in between. Maria? His voice was uncertain, a tone he'd never used in his entire adult life. Is this okay with you? She stood up and walked around the table. Stood in front of him while he held her daughter. You took a bullet for me. You protected my child. You call every day. You came to dinner wearing casual clothes because Splendor said your suits were too scary. She touched his face gently. You're already more of a father to her than Chitty ever was. So yes, it's more than okay. Then Splendor grabbed her mother's hand and pulled her closer, creating a circle of 3. See? Now we're a real family. And Kong Minhu, the Ice Prince of Seoul, the supreme boss who'd never shown weakness, closed his eyes and held them both and thought that maybe Chitty had been right about one thing. He was in love with Maria. Completely. Terrifyingly. In a way that made him vulnerable and weak and absolutely certain he'd destroy anyone who tried to hurt her or her daughter ever again. Hit that like button if your heart just exploded, because this story is about to get even more intense. The first week of their new arrangement was chaos. Beautiful, terrifying chaos that Minhu had no training or preparation for. He learned that 7-year-olds asked approximately 9,000 questions per day. Learned that bedtime stories were non-negotiable. Learned that jollof rice tasted even better the second day. Learned that Maria hummed when she cooked. Learned that Splendor had nightmares about Chitty exactly 3 times a week, and the only thing that helped was when Minhu sat on her bed and promised the monsters were gone. He learned that being part of family meant showing up, not sending his men to handle things, not throwing money at problems, actually being present. Which is why he was sitting at a parent-teacher conference on a Thursday afternoon, listening to a kindergarten teacher explain that Splendor was brilliant, but struggling to make friends because she didn't speak Korean well yet. She's incredibly bright. The teacher, a kind woman in her 50s named Mrs. Kim, smiled at them, but she's hesitant to interact with other children. I think she's afraid of saying the wrong thing. She needs time. Maria said gently. We only moved to Korea 2 years ago, and the past year has been difficult for her. Mrs. Kim nodded sympathetically, then looked at Min, who with barely concealed curiosity. And you are? I'm her father. The words came out easily, like he'd been saying them his whole life instead of for a week. Mrs. Kim's eyes widened. She clearly recognized him. Most people in Seoul did. But to her credit, she just smiled and said, It's wonderful that Splendor has such a supportive family. Perhaps if you could practice Korean with her at home, help her feel more confident? We will. Minhu promised. And if any of the other children give her trouble, I want to know immediately. The teacher blinked. I'm sure that won't be necessary, Mr. Kong Minhu. And I'm very serious about my daughter's well-being. After the conference, as they walked to the car with Splendor skipping ahead, Maria touched his arm. Thank you for coming. And for calling yourself her father. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Minhu watched Splendor jump over a crack in the sidewalk, giggling to herself. She asked me to be her father. I'm not going to do this halfway. You really mean that, don't you? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. That night, Minhu received a call from Shin. Boss, we have a problem. Some of Chitty's associates from the Viper network escaped during the Lagos raids. 4 of them, and they've put out a contract on you. That's not new. I have 17 active contracts on my life at last count. This one's different. Shin's voice was grim. They're not targeting you directly. They're targeting your weakness. They know about the woman and the child. They have photos, boss. Photos of you at the school conference. Photos of you having dinner at their apartment. They're planning to grab them and use them as leverage. Minhu's blood went cold. When? Intelligence says within the next 72 hours. They want revenge for what you did to Chitty and their organization. They figure the best way to destroy you is to destroy what you care about. Minhu made a decision in 2 seconds. Move them tonight. Right now. Get Maria and Splendor to the safe house in Pyeongchang. Full security detail. No one in or out without my personal authorization. And you? I'm going to hunt down every single member of the Viper network who's left alive. And I'm going to make sure they understand what happens when you threaten my family. Within an hour, Minhu's men had Maria and Splendor in armored vehicles heading toward a secure facility 3 hours outside Seoul. Splendor cried because she didn't understand why they had to leave their apartment. Maria held her and watched Minhu through the car window with fear in her eyes. How long? She asked. Until it's safe. Until I've eliminated the threat. Minhu crouched by the car door. I'm sorry. I knew this might happen. Knew that being close to me would put you in danger. Then maybe we should leave Korea? Maria's voice was quiet. Go back to Nigeria, or go somewhere else where Chitty's people can't find us. No. Minhu's voice was steel. You're not running anymore. You're not hiding anymore. You're mine to protect, and I will burn down every organization in West Africa, if that's what it takes to keep you safe. Splendor stopped crying and looked at him with wide eyes. You're going to fight the monsters again? Yes. All by yourself? I have help. But yes, essentially. Splendor grabbed his hand through the car window. Promise you'll come back. Promise you won't die fighting the monsters. Because I just got a daddy, and I don't want to lose him. Minhu kissed her forehead. I promise. I always keep my promises. The car pulled away. Minhu watched until the taillights disappeared, then turned to his assembled men. Shin, Park, G1, Chun, and 15 others, all armed, all loyal, all waiting for orders. Minhu's voice was deadly calm. We're going to war. Again. We're going to find every remaining member of the Viper network in Korea, in China, in Nigeria, if necessary. And we're going to end them. Permanently. No mercy. No survivors. They threaten my family. They die. What followed over the next 60 hours was the most brutal manhunt Seoul had seen in a decade. Minhu called in every favor, activated every contact, used every resource his organization possessed. The Council of Seven backed him fully, because threatening a Supreme Boss's family was threatening all of them. They found the first Viper network member in Incheon, hiding in a shipping container. He talked within 10 minutes, gave up 2 more locations. They found the second and third members in Busan, trying to board a boat to Japan. They didn't survive the encounter. The 4th member was smarter. He'd gone to ground in Seoul's Nigerian community, hiding among legitimate immigrants who wanted nothing to do with the Viper network but were too afraid to turn him in. Men who found him anyway, because he had something the Viper network didn't. He had Splendor's courage reminding him why he was fighting. He had Maria's smile motivating him to come home alive. He had a family to protect. The final confrontation happened in a warehouse in Namyangju at 3 a.m. on the third night. The last Viper network member, a man named Obi who'd been Chitty's second in command, was cornered with no escape. "You can't kill all of us." Obi spat blood. "The Viper network is bigger than you. Bigger than Korea. We have operations in 15 countries. You destroyed one cell. We'll rebuild." "No." Minhu's voice was ice. "You won't. Because I'm not just destroying your organization. I'm destroying the idea of it. Every government agency across 3 continents now has your complete operational files. Every victim you've ever scammed has been contacted and given evidence for prosecution. Every corrupt official protecting you has been exposed. By tomorrow morning, the Viper network will exist only in prison cells and graves. You're a monster. I know exactly what I am." Minhu pulled out his phone and showed Obi a photo. Splendor's drawing. The one with 3 people holding hands. "But I'm a monster with something to protect. And that makes me more dangerous than you could ever imagine." He left Obi alive long enough to confess everything to Interpol agents who'd been waiting outside. Left him alive to face justice. Because Splendor had asked him once if all bad people had to die, and he'd promised her that sometimes they could just go to prison instead. He was trying to be worthy of being called a father. The sun was rising when Minhu finally made it to the safe house in Pyeongchang. He was exhausted, blood-stained, running on coffee and adrenaline and the desperate need to see Maria and Splendor safe. The guards let him through immediately. He walked into the house and found Maria sitting by a window, awake despite the early hour. She turned when she heard him, and the relief on her face made something in Minhu's chest crack wide open. "It's done?" she asked. "It's done. All of them. Either in custody or dead. You're safe now. Splendor's safe." Maria stood and crossed the room in 3 steps. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around him and held on like he was the only solid thing in a storm. Minhu held her back, his face buried in her hair, breathing in the scent of her, feeling the warmth of her, understanding for the first time why men went to war for women they loved. "I was so scared," Maria whispered. "Not for me. For you. I kept thinking, what if you don't come back? What if Splendor loses another father? What if I lose you before I even get to tell you how I feel? How do you feel?" She pulled back just enough to look at him. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Kong Minhu. I think I've been falling since the moment you took a bullet for me. Since you answered my daughter's phone calls. Since you came to dinner and let her call you daddy. I know it's too soon. I know it's crazy. I know you're a dangerous man who does terrible things. But I'm falling anyway, and I can't seem to stop." "Good." Minhu kissed her forehead. "Because I'm already in love with you. Completely. Terrifyingly. In a way that makes me vulnerable and weak and absolutely certain I'd destroy the world to keep you safe. That's the most romantic and terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm a romantic and terrifying man." They stood there holding each other while the sun rose over the mountains, and Minhu thought that maybe this was what peace felt like. Not the absence of war, just the presence of someone worth coming home to. "Daddy?" A small voice interrupted them. Splendor stood in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "You came back. You kept your promise. I always keep my promises." Minhu crouched down as she ran to him. "Always. Did you beat the monsters?" "Every single one." Splendor threw her arms around his neck. "I knew you would, because you're the strongest daddy in the whole world." Over her head, Minhu met Maria's eyes, saw the love there, the trust, the hope for a future they could build together. Saw everything he'd never thought he deserved and everything he'd fight to keep. "Can we go home now?" Splendor asked. "I miss our apartment, and I want to make jollof rice for Daddy to celebrate." "Yes." Minhu stood up, keeping her in his arms. "Let's go home." 6 months later, Minhu stood in the living room of an apartment that had become more home than his mansion ever was. Splendor's drawings covered the refrigerator. Maria's cooking filled the air with spices and warmth. And on the coffee table sat a small velvet box containing a ring he'd spent 3 weeks choosing. "You're really doing this?" Shin asked from the doorway. "The Ice Prince of Seoul is getting married? I'm really doing this. The council thinks you're insane. The council can think whatever they want. I'm still supreme boss. I still run this city. But I also get to come home to a family who loves me. That's not insane. That's the smartest thing I've ever done." That night, after Splendor was asleep and Maria was humming in the kitchen, Minhu pulled out the ring box. His hands were shaking. Him, the man who'd faced down Yakuza warriors without flinching. Shaking because he was about to ask a question. Maria turned from the stove and saw him standing there with the box open. Her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm not a good man," Minhu said. "I've done terrible things, and I'll probably do more terrible things. I live in a world of violence, and I can't promise you a normal life. But I can promise to love you and Splendor with everything I have. I can promise to protect you with my life. I can promise to try every single day to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me. Marry me, Maria. Let me be your husband and Splendor's father. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." Maria crossed the room and cupped his face in her hands. Yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to the danger and the chaos and the beautiful mess of loving you. Yes to being a family. Yes to everything. They kissed while jollof rice burned on the stove, and Splendor's gentle snoring came from her bedroom, and the city lights of Seoul twinkled through the windows. And Kong Min, who'd spent 42 years as ice, finally understood what it meant to melt. The wedding happened 3 months later. Small ceremony. Just the council members, Minhu's most trusted men, a few of Maria's friends from the Nigerian community, and Splendor as flower girl in the brightest yellow dress Seoul had ever seen. Splendor cried happy tears when Minhu officially adopted her. Cried harder when she got to call him daddy legally. Cried hardest when he promised in front of everyone that he'd protect her and her mother until his last breath. In his vows, Minhu said, "I was ice for 42 years, cold and hard and alone. Then a 7-year-old girl stood in front of my car and trusted me not to run her over. And her mother taught me that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about being terrified and choosing love anyway. You two melted me, made me human again, made me want to be better than I was. I love you both with everything I have." Maria's vows were simpler. "You're my hero, my protector, my monster who fights monsters. I love you for the man you are and the man you're becoming. I love you for loving my daughter like she's yours. I love you for being brave enough to let us in." They honeymooned in Nigeria, where Maria introduced Minhu to her family and Splendor ran on beaches and laughed in the sunshine. Where Minhu learned about Maria's culture and her past and the strength it took to survive everything she'd survived. And when they came back to Seoul, they came back as a family. Complete. Real. Unbreakable. 2 years later, Minhu sat at Splendor's 9th birthday party, surrounded by children and parents and normalcy he'd never experienced before. Maria was pregnant with their second child. The Viper Network was a memory. His organization ran smoothly under Shin's daily management, while Minhu focused more on being a father than a crime lord. He watched Splendor blow out her candles and make a wish. Watch her hug her mother and then run to him, climbing into his lap like she'd done 1,000 times before. "What did you wish for?" he asked. "Can't tell you. It won't come true." Minhu smiled. "Fair enough." But Splendor leaned close and whispered, "I wish that we could be happy like this forever. You and Mommy and me and the baby. I wish that the monsters would never come back." Minhu held her close and kissed the top of her head. Some wishes don't need magic to come true. Some wishes just need someone willing to fight for them. And I will fight for this family every single day for the rest of my life. Because that's what fathers do. That's what love means. That's what happens when a 7-year-old girl stands in front of a car and dares a monster to be something more. Kong Min, who had been ice for 42 years. But Splendor and Maria had taught him to melt, and he'd never been happier to be human. Smash that like button and subscribe if this story just wrecked you in the best way possible. Drop a comment telling me which moment made you cry, because I know you cried. Don't even try to deny it. Hit that notification bell, because you do not want to miss what's coming next. Bye, lovelies. Thanks for reading this epic tale of redemption, love, and the little girl who saved Seoul's most dangerous man by being brave enough to trust him. See you in the next story.